Okay, this is Carl from CY Fitness, leading on from the last video, which looked at how joints move, what their function's supposed to be, and how that can impact on your overall movement and joint health. We're going to look at how to mobilise the hip joint a little bit. Most of us spend all day sat down with a flexed hip. So when we try and do something like running, squatting, playing tennis, football, whatever, we're probably going to have some issues with the hips that have been fixed in a certain position. So we want to retrieve normal function to them before we actually get into an exercise. So if we take a squat, for example, we want to make sure that when we squat, there's plenty of movement through the hips so that the knees aren't compromised and neither is the lower back. So from the side that should look, hopefully, I have been weightlifting this morning so I might be a little tight, but that should look fairly, like a fairly normal squat, a good range of movement. Now, if your hips are tight from sitting down all day, or a number of issues, it's quite easy to sort of remove those issues and get the hip joint functioning normally. We're going to do three things here. First of all, we're going to try and get any muscle knots or adhesions out of the muscle before we start moving it. Most of us all have sort of small tears, small injuries in the muscle over the years, and when the fibres repair, they tend to repair crossing over each other. They can form lumps and adhesions in the muscle. Now if you start stretching the muscle without addressing these, it's like pulling on two ends of a rope that's got a knot in it. That knot's going to get more and more tight, more and more problematic. So what we're going to try and do first of all is use the foam roller to get rid of these adhesions. So what we're going to do here is work on the front of the thigh where the hip flexors are. We're going to also work on the side where the iliotibial band is, which ties the hip to the knee and the glute ties into there. So what we're going to do, about 20 seconds on each one, start on the front of the thigh at the top and just roll slowly down. Try and keep the muscle relaxed, keep your weight as much as possible on that area and just see if there are any tight spots there. If you do find a tight spot, you can kind of roll side to side, back to front, and just kind of keep a little bit of motion on there as if it was as if someone was kind of working on that knot with their fingers or their hands until you feel that muscle start to relax a little bit. Come all the way down to the knee. Once you reach the knee, just come onto your side and work all the way back along the ITB, coming from the knee back up to the hip. Again, if you find any particularly nasty tight areas, stop and pause on that area, and that should start to remove those knots. You probably find first couple of times you do this it will be really painful, but as you start to address the problem it should become better each time. So that's taking the knots out of those problem areas. Next thing we're going to do, I'm actually going to do it on the other leg. We're going to open up those hips, open up, stretch through the hip flexors there. So what we're going to do is going to take a split stance here. You can do this a number of ways, but this is the easiest one in this particular area. So I'm going to take a split squat stance and basically keeping my abs nice and tight, drop the knee down just to tap it on the ground and up again, reaching up at the same time. So I'm lengthening through the muscle here and stretching out that hip flexor complex. Then the final stage of this is what I'm going to do is activate the opposing muscle, the glute. And the principle here is if the opposing muscle is contracting, the muscle we're working on, the hip flexor, is going to need to relax. It's a basic body principle. So what we're going to do here is go into a bridge. So laying on your back, or you can do it with your shoulders on the bench. All we're going to do, feet nice and close to the glutes. Again, keep your abs nice and firm, and we're just going to press the heels into the ground drive the hips up and squeeze the glute. And we're just going to do about 10 reps of these. Make sure you're squeezing the glute there, and that will start to relax the hip flexors through here. So 10 of those, and always with this type of action, always test and retest. So test your squat before you start doing it, see how it feels. Once you've done the stretches, test your squat again, and that should feel much better, much more mobile and much stronger.